What's happening, guys? Welcome to the Dynasty Warzone, the People's Dynasty podcast. On today's show, we are going to kick off a second part of our series. Last week's we did sells. This week's we're doing buys. And I'll tell you who's always by my side. It is my co-host. He is the man of the hour and the man with the power. Jerry Sinclair, buddy, what's going on?
Fantastic intro. I am absolutely wonderful. I am happy to be sitting here talking with you. But on a day like today, Randall, I am a mere peasant in the presence of the regal character that sits below me on this YouTube channel. So please, for the love of all that is good in this world, bring this man in.
Oh, I'm going to. So it's the summertime. A lot of the newer listeners, probably don't know. I'm seriously involved with youth baseball with my son, and I don't always communicate to Jerry, like what the show topic may be like days in advance. And so today, this morning, early before we went to go play, I sent all the stuff out, and Jerry saw our guest's name in the show sheet, and he texts me, and he says, "Oh shit, we got Dan." And I was like, "That's right, we've got Dan," and Dan happens to be Dan Williamson. You can follow Dan on Twitter at overhypedsleeper. Drop the last E in sleeper. Dan is the co-host of the GOAT District podcast. Now, the GOAT District podcast is found on their YouTube channel as well as Player Profiler, just like this podcast. Dan is one of the best high-stakes players and redraft players and a best ball degenerate, on top of being a really good dynasty player, which is why he's here. And he is the most uncomplicated fella. Dan, it's been a little bit, but welcome to the Dynasty Warzone via Player Profiler.
Always a pleasure to be here. Just love hanging out with you guys. And since my name is not Theo, that means I get to hang out with Jerry too.
That's one of the. I want to see how long we can keep that bit running. So for those that don't know, if you're a Player Profiler YouTube subscriber, obviously you know our guy Theo. Now Theo's technically the boss. He's like the director of content here at Player Profiler, but he has told me he is not coming back on the Warzone until he gets to be on the show with Jerry, because Jerry, also a very busy fella, things come up, and Theo has been very kind and willing to step in and pitch hit, if you will, when Jerry's been out on work or vacation or whatever. But he says he's not coming back. But the fact that Dan co-hosts the podcast with Theo and he's getting to podcast with Jerry makes this all the better. But Dan, anything else going on with the GOAT District? I know you guys are doing a bunch of best ball stuff. You got dynasty stuff, a lot going on in the district.
Yeah, absolutely. So last week we had Billy Muzio on. He's coming on for part 2 this week. We're just kind of diving deep into some different players. They're a little bit confusing, hard to figure out, more for redraft than for dynasty, but some of it's going to be applicable to dynasty as well. And we've also got on Thursday night, I believe that Biplab Mandel and I, who Bip is a great high stakes player, he and I are going to be doing a live draft for the Superflex tourney on FFPC.
Well, you are a busy fella. Now, you may be uncomplicated, but you are busy. But make sure, if you're subscribed to the Player Profiler channel, set your clock or turn notifications on, because Dan and JD and their guests and Theo, they stream live this same time on Wednesday evenings. You don't want to miss that, because they hit on a bunch of different topics as it relates to fantasy football. And with best ball and redraft season kicking off, they're kind of mixing it up everywhere. And this one last second of shameless promotion, and we'll get right into the dynasty buys that you are here for. Remember, we're mixing it up. We're giving you a reason to subscribe everywhere. If you listen to the Dynasty Warzone podcast, let's say audio only, I'm doing bonus podcast. I took another non-dynasty concept that you could use for dynasty. I did that last Friday. It's called probabilistic thinking, as well as some more buys. And we're doing these little 10-minute videos on the Player Profiler YouTube channel. So if you're an audio subscriber, that's the reason to go back and subscribe to the YouTube. Just a ton of content. We don't want to cram it all, in one spot, but we want to mix it up a little bit. and have a reason to check out everywhere. So Player Profiler, Dynasty Warzone, YouTube channels, and podcast channels. So real quick before we get into the sells, or excuse me, the buys. Now the sells were last week. That was our other guest. That was Matty Keywoom of the Trade Gods and the Game Plan podcast. But right now we owe you a little word from our friends at Underdog.
Let's take a moment to talk about Underdog Fantasy. Now, many of you have already signed up. Thousands have signed up from Player Profiler already over the years. Underdog has supported us since 2020. Much of what you see on Player Profiler is because of Underdog, because of their support. Get the Underdog app, plug in that promo code Underworld. I used to play Underdog just for the best ball drafts. I mean, the best ball drafts are amazing. These draft rooms fill so quickly, and you can win life-changing money. You want to take advantage of all the sleepers we talk about on this show? Well, what better place than in an Underdog draft room to do that? And I recommend taking your Underdog play to the next level by diving into their NFL pick'ems. It's important to correlate those NFL pick'ems. You can pick both the quarterbacks and the wide receivers to exceed expectations. Correlate them, and you can 5x your payout. Bada bing, bada boom. Underdog Fantasy, the promo code is Underworld. For an instant deposit match up to $100, Underdog is the truest friend of the Underworld.
And there you go. A little Underdog word there. And where are my manners? We were going to get right into the Dynasty buys, but we can't not do good people, bad tweets. Dan, it wouldn't be a show if you came on and we didn't do good people, bad tweets.
Absolutely, we got to have it. I mean, I'm craving the fix. Let's go.
Well, that's part of the reason why Dan, came on. Now this was a reply to another tweet, but this was sent to me. And guys, if you see a tweet out there that you just need to have some WarZone input on, by all means, send it to me just like this one was sent to me. This one is from Smartest Falcon Fan at IKnowBall04. And he said the gap between Marvin Harrison and Quentin Johnston is about the same as the talent gap between Saquon Barkley and Breece Hall. Now, I don't know who's being insulted in this tweet, but someone's getting insulted. He didn't even say, because I'm assuming it's a he, because it's a male type structure in the picture. But someone's taking a rap across the bees right here. I mean, I feel like it's Marvin Harrison, because here's the thing: if he's talking about Marvin Harrison Jr., like what in the hell are you talking about? He's been called the greatest wide receiver prospect since Calvin Johnson. And I'm going to tell you right now, if I had the choice between Marvin Harrison today, not Marvin Harrison like 20 years ago, but Marvin Harrison today or Quentin Johnston, it's going to be close. So I'm not a Quentin Johnston guy. Now, Dan, I know you're a Baylor guy, but that's kind of in that same region as TCU. Where are you and the GOATs at on Quentin Johnston, and what are your takes on this tweet?
Well, Quentin Johnston, I think, is not a guaranteed hit. Whereas Marvin Harrison is a guaranteed hit. So, yeah, I don't see this at all, because Saquon and Breece were both guaranteed hits. Marvin Harrison's guaranteed hit. Quentin Johnston is the guy who does not fit in this tweet at all. I don't know who's in the league with this guy, but if you have Quentin Johnston, go sell it to him right now.
Jerry, what are your thoughts? Because Jerry is as close to the Devi guy on the Dynasty Warzone crew as possible. Now, a little small shameless plug, we do have a show on our feed, the Dynasty Warzone feed, called The Rookie Rundown. The host's name is Dallas Hyder. He's our Devi rookie guy. But Jerry, that's you on this show. When I say when he says that Marvin Harrison is to Quentin Johnston as Saquon Barkley is to Breece Hall, what are your thoughts?
I mean, you're giving pretty high praise to Quentin Johnston. And I'm not saying that it's not possible that Quentin Johnston can't be great, but Saquon Barkley has finished as an RB1. Breece Hall was well on his way to doing it before the injury. It's spicy. And hopefully you mean Marvin Harrison Jr.
I mean, because
if you mean senior, then you're higher than giraffe dick, because this man had double-digit touchdowns and like 1,400 yards for damn near a decade straight. I'm going to guess
it's my favorite stat. It's my favorite stat, like that most people don't understand. I know we have a lot of newer listeners like Jerry, Dan, and I have played Dynasty and Fantasy for a long time. Marvin Harrison had an 8-year stretch, 8 years, where he had at least 1,000 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns. 8 straight years.
Silly.
It is ridiculous. So people forget how flipping good Marvin Harrison Sr. was. Forget Junior. He'll have his day.
But Junior too.
Yeah, it doesn't even matter who we're talking about here. Either one.
Yeah. I mean, the competition that guy had throughout his college career and the numbers that he could put up, it's silly too. Listen, I have pivoted a little bit on QJ. You know, I was a hater for a long time, and he ended up in a good situation, so I have accumulated a few more shares than I intended on it. But come on, man.
Hey, I'm with the Podfather on this one. He's slow Brashad Perriman. So I wanted to pivot to this tweet because the one that we were going to use is tied to rankings. We could use it another time. I thought this one was very fresh, and remember, it is July. We're bored. I haven't heard a peep of really anything since what, training camp? I guess they're not training. They're mini camps. They're like rookie camps. I haven't really heard anything. So I think people are just jonesing to get some takes.
Yeah, it's 100%. All fluff.
Dan, anything else to add before we move on?
No, but that's exactly what time of year it is. I mean, there's just, all the players are off doing other things, and so there's really not a whole lot going on. So the fantasy community is just out there manufacturing stuff. So
and Sleeper is not helping either with some of their notifications.
Exactly.
Well,
so this is a good time to kind of just focus on what you know, focus on trying to figure out the things you want to know, but don't spend a lot of time listening to the news.
And well, before we go, let's get a word from Dana White.
Federal prison. Federal fucking prison. If you're that fucking stupid and somebody else wants to do it, knock yourself out.
I mean, Dana White closes out good people, bad tweets every week for a reason, because Dana White puts it like it is. So, all right, here we go. We are into the segment everybody tuned in for. We are talking dynasty buys. Now, I bring this up because depending on what position or what status your roster is in right now, should depend on not only who you're buying, but when you're buying them to fill out your dynasty roster. So, Dan, when I initially asked you to come on and said we were talking about dynasty buys, what are you thinking of when I say, hey, Dan, we're talking dynasty buys in July?
Basically, I'm looking at either players that are going to help my team win now, or I'm looking at players that are going to help me in a rebuild, depending on where I'm at with any particular team. But I want players that I think the market is undervaluing as much as possible, though if I am contending, it doesn't really matter to me as much if they're being undervalued, as long as they're not being overvalued. I'll go ahead and buy fairly valued players if they're going to help me get a title.
And Gerald?
I think just going against market trends is usually what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to exploit value wherever I can. It's a tough game, and just putting yourself in good situations over the long run and just getting that little bit of edge every single time, that is exactly what I'm going to do. And if the narrative is zigging, then I'm going to try and zag in certain places so that I can create that. So in the event that I do have a contender, maybe later on I can sort of overpay a little bit if I've put myself in a situation where I can.
Well, for me, this is actually this will surprise people because I do not really like basketball, but I was listening to a basketball podcast, and they were talking about potentially trading Damian Lillard from the Portland Trail Blazers maybe to the Miami Heat. And the host was talking about how you got to be careful because and then it kind of circled back to the DeAndre Hopkins trade about, being one player away. You've got to be real careful in Dynasty, especially right now, because football is such a different sport than basketball. The baseball trade deadline's coming up. You got to be real careful about how you trade in Dynasty. Like, I'm all for right now in the late, I guess it's the midsummer. I'm all for trading for wide receivers and quarterbacks right now. I'm going to be, Jerry, this is your word, I'm going to be a little trepidatious on trading for running backs. If I'm trading for running backs, especially on a contender, man, I really want to do that in October. I know I'm going to pay more, But you know what? I don't want to make that quote unquote win now trade to go get Saquon Barkley or Christian McCaffrey, knowing the volatility of the position. So I just wanted to bring that up. And I will say this is the last month or so. You get into September. This is the last month or so for cheap old guy season, because old guys get worth a lot more money, or I guess dynasty value, when you get into point scoring season. Cooper Kupp is going to go for a lot more in September when we are reminded that the guy scores 20 fantasy points a game. Oh, wait a minute, 20 fantasy points a game? That helps you win? Oh, yeah, he's worth more now. And then in February, he's back to worth, half of what he is today. So those are some of the things that I was thinking about when I came up with this. And we are going to do holds next week. We're going to do holds of players that you probably shouldn't be trading, either because they're going to be worth more later, or you should just keep them as one of the foundation pieces of your dynasty roster. So, Jerry, let's jump into it. I'm going to give the floor to Dan. Now, Dan, we're going to start with the rebuild guy. Who's the guy if you're on a rebuild? And Dan, feel free to choose one QB, super flex, whatever the format you want to bring up. But who's a guy that if you're rebuilding right now, who are you looking to build around?
Yeah, so if I'm looking to rebuild right now, a lot of times what I'm looking for is picks, but I'm also looking for those players who I think are going really cheap that are going to be worth a lot more next year. So I'm going to bring out Treylon Burks, because I think he's a guy who's still coming awfully cheap in Dynasty. He was my number one prospect last year. That probably wasn't the right take, but I still stand behind what I saw. And I still feel like he's going to be a very, very good player. I think he could be borderline elite, but he's certainly going to be a strong wide receiver. And when I'm doing a rebuild, that's where I want to start, as I want to start getting my picks and start building that wide receiver core up a little bit, get that quarterback in place, and then move on from there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. If you're just starting, or maybe in like the second phase of a rebuild, you don't want to add running backs. Their life cycle is just so short. And by the time that you get the running backs and then you go get the wide receivers, then you got to go get new running backs, and you wind up in this spin cycle of perpetually rebuilding. Lock yourself in. Now, you guys know I'm not the biggest Treylon Burks fan in the world.
It's funny because he's fat.
I am not the biggest Treylon Burks fan in the world, but that doesn't mean that he can't be great, and he's going to get a ton of volume. I think as a Treylon Burks neutral, I went to Treylon neutral. As long as he fades DeAndre Hopkins in Tennessee, I think he's going to get a ton of volume. So I guess that would make him a value. But Jera, what do you think about Treylon Burks, and who is your rebuild player?
I had three names, just sort of, because I don't like to prepare for the show very well, so I don't look and see what you pick. So that way, I figured if I had three names, I was at least going to get one of them. And Treylon Burks was one of my guys. So I'm with you on that. Mine is, in virtually every rebuild situation, what I want to do, assuming it's Superflex, is I want to solidify my QB and I want to solidify my wide receivers, just because of the longevity and the stability of the position more times than not. Tight ends are barren wasteland that I have complained about a lot, so I'm not going to do it again. And running backs, we have mentioned, volatile on a level that's almost immeasurable. So I'm going to go with the quarterback, since Treylon Burks was the wide receiver. And it's a guy that took a lot of stride last year and really is not loved. In fact, he's sort of hated, and it's Daniel Jones. Brian Daboll did wondrous things for that man. He added 700 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns. If he grows, the world is your oyster for him, and he is such a value. And even if he doesn't grow and he's sort of just the same guy, his acquisition cost is low enough that he is a great QB3 for you to have. And if your team is bad, maybe he doesn't grow and he ends up finishing as QB 13 or whatever he is, you're still going to have an early rookie pick next year. So you can add that foundational piece, and then you'll also have depth in case some shit happens, because shit happens in this game. It is not friendly to the players. So I'm going to take Daniel Jones. What I don't want to do is I don't want to pay a ton, right? So I want to try and find value and let my rookie picks sort of build that foundation.
Well, let me throw a quick word on Daniel Jones, and then I want to get both a dynasty and a best ball outlook on Daniel Jones from Dan, because again, I don't want to put his bankroll out there in public, but Dan plays pretty high stakes. So, and it's not only because Dan plays high stakes that makes him an expert. It's that to be able to play high stakes year after year after year, you have to be able to return that money, or you have to be super rich. And maybe Dan is super rich, but I know he runs inside. I see him shaking his head. Apparently, he's not.
I'm retired. I'm on a fixed income.
Yeah,
here,
you're on a fixed income. So I've always been a Daniel Jones guy. I had a tremendous amount of success with Josh Allen the year that he came out as a rookie. So I'm always going to go back to that well. I'm always going to go back to, that's why I like Kenny Pickett last year. I'm always going to go back to the most undervalued guy. But Daniel Jones was QB8 on the season last year, if I remember correctly, top of my head. And I think there's only room to grow. And that sounds crazy. It's like maybe 8's close to the ceiling. Maybe he can get to 5. But guys, he got to 8 while throwing like 15 touchdowns. And they added Darren Waller. And they should have a healthy Rondale Moore, or Wandale, not Rondale, Wandale Robinson. And they re-signed Slayton, and they've got pieces there. And year 2, you're supposed to take that next gradual step. So I don't mind Danny Dimes as a piece to go get on a rebuild, because he got the 4-year contract. So you're going to have him for 2 or 3 years in most dynasty leagues. So I am totally good with that. Dan, where are you at on Danny Dimes?
Yeah, I've come around on Daniel Jones a lot. He was not an asset I was looking to acquire before last year in Dynasty, but when Daboll came over, it really changed things. Because a lot of what I didn't like about Daniel Jones was really more the offense that he was in, and the coaching decisions and everything else. It wasn't necessarily so much his talent. You could kind of see the talent bubbling up underneath there, but there was just such a tight lid on it. And we're starting to see that lid come off, and we're starting to see the talent really bubble up. And I think we've got something that might be pretty good with Jones. In worst case scenario, his legs are going to put a floor under him. And like you said, I think he's got some ceiling left to go.
Yeah, I've always been a Daniel Jones guy. I mean, again, I like smart people. It's kind of the reason why I'm in on Will Levis. It's why I was in on Justin Herbert. These guys that are, honors students in college and taking real classes, like, Justin Herbert was taking chemistry. Will Levis has taken finance. Will Levis was accepted into all of the Ivy League schools. I like smart people. Daniel Jones went to Duke. They don't let dummies into Duke. So that's why I like smart people. My guy, I don't know his Wonderlic. He went to Florida, and he's a quarterback, and he's an Indianapolis Colt. It's Anthony Richardson. And I am buying the hype, but here's the thing. You're going to see that first camp highlight video coming out of Grand Park. I'm there like every weekend right now. But that's where the Colts host their training camp. And when the videos of this kid come out, the prices are going to go up. Now, Bijan Robinson has done you a favor, because even in Superflex leagues, he's driven this man to the 102. Now, I know he's a quarterback. I know there's some sizzle, but I absolutely love the combination of his athleticism, arguably, and it's not really arguable. If you use PlayerProfiler.com, you can look on there and say he had the best combine ever in the history of quarterbacks from an athletic standpoint. You're getting Shane Steichen. Go back to 2 years ago. He had the best season ever leading Justin Herbert. That was Justin Herbert's best season's a better way to say that. And then last year, Jalen Hurts took a tremendous step. I'm not promising you that Anthony Richardson is going to be Justin Herbert or he's going to be Jalen Hurts. Now, as a Colts fan, I'd be all in for that. I'm not going to lie. But as a dynasty gamer, I want to get him now, because even though he's going to cost you 102-ish prices in a rookie startup, or excuse me, in a rookie draft, most of those are over by now, but he's still one of the guys that if he hits, he could 2 or 3x his value. We could look back a year from now, and he could be QB 3 to 5 off the board. It's not out of the range of possibilities, and that's how you build equity in your dynasty roster. So if you're rebuilding and you need that stud and you need those name brand players, For me, I'd rather go after a guy like Anthony Richardson. Now, Dan, I'm sure you're probably not taking a lot of Anthony Richardson in best ball, or maybe you are. What are your thoughts on Richardson?
Yeah, Richardson's a tricky play for this year in best ball, but in Dynasty, you've got to love the fact that he's had so much hype around him already. And usually what that does is that insulates the price. Even if he doesn't do great this year, he's still insulated for next year. So if you don't like what you see, you can probably get out for pretty close to the same price that you got in for. And if you do like what you see, I mean, this is one of those guys that is, as you said, he could go to the moon. He could be Jalen Hurts. And that's what we hope he does. But those are the kind of chances you want to take when you're starting a rebuild, because you know what? If he doesn't pan out, you've lost a year. Okay, big deal. You go back to the drawing board on quarterback, but you can do so many other things.
I love the thing that Dan said there about insulating his value. And remember, he's going to get shielded from a value standpoint because of the year 2 breakout of Jalen Hurts and the year 3 breakout of Josh Allen. He is going to, people are going to say, give him one more year. And then if he misses in year 2, I give him one more year. He's going to have the Josh Allen year. So that's a really sharp call. Now I feel even better about my take, because when Dan Williamson backs you up, you've nailed it. Jerry, what are your thoughts on A-Rich?
I do agree that his value is insulated. Where I worry is if you are trying to acquire him and you didn't draft him, I worry that he's not a value there and you're going to have to overpay for him. Because the person that took him at 102 is very, very much excited that they have Anthony Richardson on their roster.
Or they could be very disappointed that they didn't get Bijan with the 102. So maybe you might find someone. I'm telling you, Bijan, even if it's just a little bit, him being in this draft class makes Anthony Richardson at the quarterback position in a super flex or 2 QB just a touch more attainable.
Yeah,
I hear you.
Can we chase a rabbit here? Never
Sure.
assume that the other person values a player like you think that they value the player.
Listen, we found that out with Amari Cooper a couple days ago in our league.
Yes.
Well, maybe
Amari
we'll
Cooper
cover
might
that in
only
the
be worth
overtime.
a second to somebody.
Hey, I'm not saying that there are hosts of this show who might or might not have gotten Amari Cooper for a 20-25 second. You may have to tune back into Player Profiler's YouTube channel and catch the Dynasty WarZone overtime program. But real quick, one last commercial, one last spot. Let's take a quick time out and hear about the 2023 world famous, in quotations, draft kit.
Hey, it's the Podfather. I have great news. The 2023 draft kit is live. It is world famous. Why? Because it is the best resource for winning fantasy football championships that exists. There are rankings and cheat sheets for every format you can imagine. We have projections both at the team level and the player level. And wherever you are, you can click on a player, open them up, and see in-depth written analysis about what to expect in fantasy football from that player this year. And then you can click on the team, and you can get even more in-depth analysis, all the drivers of fantasy production, both in a positive and negative direction for that team, including a signature trend. And the graphics are incredible. So these team insights, they give you the team level projections, the vacated targets, the vacated areas, and that one dynamic for each team that you need to know when making decisions on draft day. And we added a bunch of features. Individual cheat sheets for Theo and Billy and Dario. So you could take your favorite analyst and download their personal draft cheat sheet. And then in the commissioners section, also brand new this year, Memphis Young lays out everything you need to know to manage a league, do's, don'ts, tips, and what the more innovative fantasy commissioners are doing this year. That's presented by Trophy Smack. The whole package is presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the FFPC, Ray Garvin, Derek Brown, the best minds in the industry contributing analysis. It's certainly not the most inexpensive draft kit on the market, but it is the best. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. Go get it.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely go get the draft kit. The live video analysis from players, people like myself, like Dan, like Jerry, we all did our guys. You click on the guy. I'll tell you, I did too. I did Najee Harris. I did Evan Ingram. So you could go to their page in the draft kit. You can click on it, and it will give you 2 to 3 minutes of why I like him. Dan, who was your guy?
I had Tyler Lockett.
Oh, steal. Jerry, who's your guy?
Joey Mixon. Joey
there you
Mix.
go. So if you want to know more, go check out the draft kit, and just a great way. Even if you just like cool stuff, there's so much included in the draft kit. Go check it out. All right, back to the buys. So let's say that in 2022, your team just made the playoffs and you weren't thinking you were going to. And maybe you made the Final Four. You finished with rookie pick 109 through 112. And you're just entering in that contenders window. And you're going to need whatever you're trading for to hopefully last the entire 3 years of this window. So think about it, something that's going to be valuable now, and it's going to be able to help you contend for the next couple of years. So Jerry, when I phrase it like that, who is the guy that comes to mind for you?
Well, we might as well just continue the conversation on this, man. It's Amari Cooper. I know that Deshaun Watson is going to be the quarterback of Cleveland for the next chunk of years. And based on his dead cap money, I know Amari Cooper is going to be there for the next 2 years, which we play Dynasty. Oh my God, it's only 2 years. But here's the thing. In this game, 2 years is an eternity and lots can happen. I'm going to take Amari Cooper because I like to say the word trade acquisition or acquisition cost. His acquisition cost is never going to amount to what his production can be. And he is the top wide receiver there. Deshaun Watson, his outlier season was last year. Shake the rust off, got a full off season, got to build more rapport with Amari Cooper, and he's cheap. That's I mean, that's the key to this sort of thing. And if you already are on the precipice, Randy loves when I say the word precipice, when you are on the precipice of the playoffs, or maybe you sneak in and you didn't really think you were gonna, you already have a solid core. So if you can grab somebody who's going to be relatively cheap for you to acquire, and you can plug them in as your wide receiver 3 or your flex, and they're going to get you 1,100, 1,200 yards, and they're not going to cost you a ton. In Randy's case, a second, and I'm going to text him, and I'm going to throw a hissy fit about it because I haven't shut up about Amari Cooper for the last 6 weeks, and nobody sends me those trades. Not that I'm bitter. It's fine. It's an easy deal.
Yeah, I like Amari Cooper. So not to keep teasing the audience. So Jerry, Dan, and I are all in a league together where we all captain individual teams. And not in fairness, I sent it to this other GM first. And he inadvertently declined it and then turned around and sent it right back to me. And I didn't. I would have sent, I'll be honest, I would have sent a 24-second. I didn't have a 24-second. So I was like, YOLO. I'll throw this 25-second out there. And sure enough, I was walking out of a meeting and I had like 9 million DMs and a text from Jerry like, that's criminal. I'm like, I just asked the question. I said, Amari Cooper for a future second? Got that deal done. Dan, you can talk about my deal, but you can also talk about Amari Cooper as a buy for a team entering their contenders window.
Yeah, I think it's a decent buy for somebody who's entering the contenders window, just, for the reasons that Jerry laid out. I mean, no, we don't know for sure that Deshaun Watson is going to come back the way that we think he is, but I don't really have a good reason to believe that he won't. I don't have any good reason to believe that Amari Cooper is going to fall off. I think when he gets hooked together with a quarterback of Deshaun Watson's talent, good things are likely to happen. So I think, especially given the price, I think that's a very reasonable bet to make.
Yeah, it feels like a pretty good deal for last year's wide receiver 10 on the season. And the wide receiver position is so sexy that he just kind of gets pushed out of the way. This is a team where I'm trying to contend. Now, I traded Cooper Kupp in this league. I got a couple of first. I got like 2 or 3 things, and I got a good deal because Dan liked that deal. And if Dan likes your deal's good. But I still needed to recoup those points, no pun intended. And I needed to recoup those points because this is a league where we have to start 10. And I believe we have to start 3 wide receivers. Yeah. So I think I got 2 firsts and John Mechie in a second or something, if I remember correctly. It was something like that. So if I gave up just that second and I turned Cooper Kupp into 2 firsts and Amari Cooper and John Mechie in a start 3 wide receiver league in a pretty high stakes league, I was pretty stoked on that. But so yeah, I can't co-sign enough on Amari Cooper. But Dan, who is your newly contending target you're looking to buy right now?
Right. So if you're in this position, the odds are that you're either weak at a position or you just need at least one more hammer to get yourself over the hump. And I think the odds are good that if you go for this player, you're going to get both, because most people are weak at tight end, and definitely Mark Andrews is a hammer. And so that's my player. He's still 28 years old, so he's, and tight ends, they of course age like fine wine, so we know this. And he's tied to a great quarterback. He's in a great offense. He's still the best receiver in this offense. Correct. So he's got everything going for him. And he's at a cheap price because he was injured a lot of last year. Lamar Jackson was injured a lot of last year. People just have that recency bias, and they just kind of, they like to forget about how good he can be. So I think he's in line for a ton of targets this year. I think he's going to turn into an absolute hammer at a position that there's only really about 4 hammers, maybe 5 in any given year. And if you've got one of those guys and he's perennially there, that's going to be a huge advantage for you every single year up until he finally falls off.
Yeah, I first of all, I think Mark Andrews does not get enough love. The term that I always use is Kelce buster. And if you're in a league where you're chasing a championship, you have to have a Kelce buster. Whether that's a TJ Hawkinson, the way he came on last year, whether it's a George Kittle, or whether it's a Mark Andrews, you have to have someone that when you're playing against Travis Kelce, because more than likely you're going to play Travis Kelce in the playoffs if you're going championship chasing. And you've got to have your guy. And I had a great debate. It was very friendly because, see, kids, you can have friendly debates on Twitter about fantasy football players. I was debating with Josh Larkey from the 33rd team. Josh is a tremendous analyst, used to be player profiler guy as well. And, he was talking about how a lot of sites had Kyle Pitts as the tight end 1. I'm like, I will gladly take Mark Andrews way ahead of Kyle Pitts. And then I can always gamble on a guy like Trey McBride, Greg Dulcich, Jelani Woods, even a Mike Gesicki I'd much rather gamble late on like a dart throw tight end and try to get some value, and knowing that I still have my points in my lineup. So that's my thought on Andrews. Couldn't agree enough. Gerald, what's your take on Andrews?
I'm actually pissed off that I didn't even think about Mark Andrews, because I would have 100% said him over Amari Cooper. In my home league, I'm in this sort of exact same situation. I ended up making the championship, but I got lucky in the playoffs, and I really shouldn't have. I think I had Joe Mixon the week he had 50, or it was close. I got lucky. I shouldn't have been there. And this offseason, I went out and bought Mark Andrews because he's easily acquirable. And like Dan said, there are just so few tight ends that can make a difference. Other than that, it's just Al Bundy, shoe clerks, and you're just hoping you can get anything that you can. And no disrespect to Al Bundy, who threw 4 touchdowns in the playoffs for Polk High, but Mark Andrews absolutely is the most available elite tight end to acquire.
Well, I owe you one as well. And I remember that when the tweet came out, and this gave you a reason to maybe fade him as what I think people were doing, but I think it was the exact opposite. And my guy's Tyreek Hill. He says he's going to quote unquote retire after his 2025 his contract ends in 2025, and he's going to retire, I guess, at the end of that. Great. So you mean I got the 23, the 24, and the 25 season with Tyreek Hill in that offense? And I'm not a Tua guy, but I got to keep it real. Tyreek Hill had a pretty darn good season, and Jalen Waddle's not going anywhere. Now, I do have a little concern that he had that little dust up with the guy at the pier, which in and of itself is not a big deal. But when you have all of these little issues in your past, that eventually at some point you're gonna catch something. That being said, I think we lose track sometimes about how blessed we've been to see a wide receiver like Tyreek Hill. I mean, the guy is a phenom, and this is not to take anything away from the run that Devontae Adams has been on, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase is emerging. We have been treated to absolute wide receiver greatness over the last 6 years with Tyreek Hill. And is he a great person? I don't know. I don't live with the guy. But when it comes to fantasy football, the guy is a legit stud. When it comes to real football, he's a legit stud. I've heard it said that he may be the greatest combination of quick and fast and able to get up to acceleration in the history of the league. And I can't say that they're wrong. And here's the thing. I went and found the tweet. If you search Tyreek Hill retirement, it'll come up. Send that tweet along with a low ball offer to someone in your league right now trying to get Tyreek Hill. And that's my guy. Dan, I see you laughing because I'm not afraid to mix some tactics in on some people.
It's absolutely a great idea to mix some tactics in on some people. And it's absolutely a great piece of advice for people in this situation because JD and I have a team that is in exactly this sort of situation. And we went out earlier this year and bought exactly that player, Tyreek Hill. He's just such a great buy. And the thing is, he's 29 years old. In 3 years, he's going to be 32. What do you think is going to happen, people? He's probably going to retire, yes. And at 32 years old, his dynasty value is going to be close to zero, even if he has actual on the field and scoring points in your lineup value, which still could happen. I mean, the guy can change his mind. So, he might go for longer than 3 years. Who knows? But I'll tell you what, if I can get 3 years out of Tyreek Hill, I'll absolutely take it, especially at the prices that we're looking at, which are, usually like a mid-first right now is what I've seen in Superflex. So I think you can do it.
Yeah, and I think the time to do it is now because he's not going to stop scoring points. And here's another, it's the little things, guys, but I was listening to Theo on a podcast the other day, and I don't remember which one because Theo does so many good ones. I do love me some Theo, but he was talking about how hard it is to find micro edges right now. You want to know what makes Tyreek Hill a sneaky little ad? Is they upgraded the backup QB because Tua, not the healthiest dude around. They went up and they added Mike Davis. Again, some people said he could be a starter somewhere. I don't necessarily agree with that, but you know what? That just gives him just a little bit of extra, security in an offense that is great. Jerry, what are your thoughts on Tyreek Hill? And then go ahead and roll. And you know what? Just give me your thoughts on Tyreek Hill. I'll set this next one up a little bit different.
If I can pay a mid-first for Tyreek Hill, Randy, I will rip my shirt off and jump out of this window because money and trash talking your friends is the absolute most important part of this game. And if you can pay that amount for an asset that is, what did you call him earlier? A phenom. I'm going to do that every single time. That's an easy deal. And he goes for this. I mean, he has more value than sort of this next category that we're going to talk about, but he's absolutely a person for that situation too.
Just be honest. I mean, I know it's an acquired taste. It's like, art means different things to different people. To watch wide receiver film, and I'm no film grinder, but if I don't know that I would choose many people to watch their wide receiver film more than Tyreek Hill. He is just, maybe Justin Jefferson, again, peak Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers. There's a handful. Again, I've lived the good life here in Indy. I saw Peyton Manning to Marvin Harrison, and that was a thing of beauty. Those guys are doing something special when Carson Palmer and Chad Ochocinco were coming to Indy to watch them play live games. So I've seen some good wide receiver stuff in my lifetime. I love Tyreek Hill. Now this last category, the last buy of the night, the last buy category, it's very simple. Maybe you won the championship last year. Maybe you were the bridesmaid. You didn't get the ring. You're looking to close the deal. Maybe this is your last true year of contendership. I've got a couple of rosters like that, and maybe you do too. And you're going to acquire that one last piece, but it's a time bomb. It's not if it goes off, it's when it goes off. Now, hopefully, it goes off weekly in your roster and wins you that championship that you're trying to get. But that when you acquire them, you are never, ever going to get what you paid for it back. But that's okay because you're going all in. You're pushing your chips in the center of the table. Now, Jerry, you're a poker player.
I am.
When I say you're acquiring an asset that is literally could be one and done. If you're lucky, it's 2, but you're never getting anything back out of it. Who are you going for?
Oh, well, Ja Webb just said it in the chat. It's Travis Kelce for me.
I think that's like I should have like avoided that. Like back in the day when you played Madden, we used to have a no Randy Moss rule. Like you couldn't play with the Vikings because they had Randy.
Well, I could pick somebody that's not Travis Kelce.
You're
okay.
good.
Do it. Let's
I mean, the tight end one. I mean, listen, Tony Gonzalez is absolutely phenomenal. Antonio Gates is great. Gronk had his time. What Travis Kelce is doing is unheard of. I mean, it's unbelievable. And he's got Patrick Mahomes and he's got Andy Reid, and he's just going to keep on keeping on. And you look at the age, and we've been looking at the age for the last 4 years and going, it's going to stop. You know, he's going to fall off. Mark Andrews is here, and TJ Hawkinson is here, and Evan Ingram's going to come up, and now Kyle Pitts is here, and it just keeps being Travis effing Kelce over and over and over. He's an animal. And there is no reason that if you are a championship contender and you don't have Travis Kelce, that you don't go try and acquire Travis Kelce, because otherwise you're going to have to go against him in the playoffs because the other person that has Travis Kelce is a contender. A rebuilder doesn't have Travis Kelce. So you're either going to have to smack someone in the face with him or get smacked by him. I don't know about you. I got tender porcelain skin. I can't handle a smack like that. So I need to have Travis Kelce.
Jerry has the skin of a China doll, apparently. But when a player is so good that it makes me invent a term, I did this 2 years ago. I call it the Kelce Buster. You know, if you don't have Travis Kelce in your lineup, you are at a severe disadvantage especially tight end premium. Because if you were fortunate enough to get in the Scott Fish Bowl, I think we're all fortunate enough to get in the Scott Fish Bowl. If you look at the Scott Fish Bowl scoring, Travis Kelce scores more than like everybody but like 2 QBs. And one of those guys is Josh Allen and the other one's Jalen Hurts. So you mean to tell me you could get like Travis Kelce and then come back around later and get like a Dak and still contend in a league like that?
And meanwhile, you're going against somebody that has David Njoku or something. Like
it's a crime. So Dan, what are your thoughts on Kelce? I think it was easy for you to agree. It's all easy for all of us to agree. And then who is your guy?
Yeah, so very easy to agree on Kelce for sure. Jerry laid out the case, but I mean, he's one of one. You want to find any receiver that Patrick Mahomes looks at like Kelce, and there is nobody. So you can sit there and you can try to pick it. Is it going to be Rashee Rice or Sky Moore or who knows who? But the one thing is, as long as the wheels haven't fallen off of Kelce yet, and they don't appear to have, he's going to be looking to Kelce early and often. So, and if it's tight end premium, even so much the better. In FFPCs, Kelce is still pretty much unacquirable. Whoever's got him is just holding on tight.
All right, and who is your guy in this category?
So I'll go out there and I'll throw out Cooper Kupp. I think he's a fantastic buy here. You got to have a little bit of faith that Stafford has passed his problems, but everything we're hearing out of Los Angeles is that Stafford has passed his problems. It looks like his injury should not linger into this year. He's having a normal offseason. He's throwing. He's doing everything he should be doing. And if he's doing that, we know a couple things. Number one is Stafford looks at Cooper Kupp pretty much like Mahomes looks at Kelce. It's the same exact sort of thing, early and often. And then secondly, the Rams are going to have a horrible defense this year. So they are going to be needing to score points. And if you're needing to score points and you're on the Rams, Kupp's going to be the guy. So he's absolutely somebody I'd love to acquire on those teams trying to squeeze one more year out. And the thing is with Kupp, I mean, you could potentially get 2 or 3 more years out of him. He's not dead yet.
Cooper Kupp, as long as I've been creating content, may be my greatest personal hit of all time. I had him everywhere, and he's won me so much money over the last 4 years. I can't thank that man enough, to be quite honest. And I got him dirt cheap in that same league that we've been, talking about as well. And, and our friend Harry in the chat was talking about, has anyone seen Stafford throw? You know what? I think Cooper Kupp in that offense, I think he would be fine even with Stetson Bennett. I don't think he's much younger than Matthew Stafford, to be quite honest. My guy, no, normally I wouldn't advocate for a running back, but the lack of real competition and real threat for touches and just his track record of health. Now, going back to college, it would have been scary. My guy's Nick Chubb. And I'll be honest, I debated Derrick Henry as well. You know, the one thing I will say about Cleveland, they need this year to work. And I love Demetric Felton. I know a lot of people are on Jerome Ford. No problem. You know, if we're doing best ball like Dan's doing best ball, if I'm not drafting Nick Chubb in a best ball, but I am drafting like Jerome Ford, because I think in a seasonal league, Chubb's going way higher than I personally feel like. And normally I take beat writer news stories with a grain of salt. But it's like, unless Demetric Felton is really getting all the receptions, Chubb has to get more receptions by proxy just because he's there. What's the Podfather call it? The law of the conservation of targets. You know, Kareem Hunt's not there. Someone's going to catch some footballs. Yeah, I think Felton's going to get some. Maybe Jerome Ford does. I don't know. But I think in this offense, you've added Elijah Moore. You've added, you know, Amari Cooper. I guess he was already there, but, you know, they added him last year. Cedric Tillman. Donovan Peoples-Jones stretching the field. David Njoku actually looked like a tight end one last year for a brief moment in time. Freeze it for a second. That's great. I think this is going to be one of the funner offenses in fantasy this year. And when you're in a division where you got to keep up with the Bengals and you've got to keep up with the Ravens, I think you're going to see fireworks in the AFC North. So I'm not normally an advocate of buying running backs in the early season, but with guys who just have a pretty consistent track record of playing double-digit games every year of their career, I'm going to go ahead and venture off the beaten path and take, you know, Nick Chubb, and I'll throw Derrick Henry in as an honorable mention. What are your thoughts on my guys there, Jer?
You know, I was definitely thinking Derrick Henry as the running back for this, but Nick Chubb is interesting, and I just looked at his cap hit for next year, and they can save $12 million. If they get rid of him. So I would say that if the only way he really ends up staying there is if Cleveland ends up having an extremely good season, and they'll probably restructure it, give him 2 years for a cheaper amount, sort of spread the money. And that's sort of your best case scenario with Nick Chubb. Otherwise, you're going to look at absolutely running him, you know, until he throws up. I don't remember which coach said that about which running back a couple years ago, but you know, just running him like crazy.
I think it was Mike Vrabel about Derrick Henry, but
yeah,
it feels right.
But like, otherwise, you're looking at a 29-year-old running back searching for a third contract on a new team, and that is just a scenario that is not very common in Dynasty and in the NFL, and there's a reason for it, because the success rate of that is just not likely. So I'm with you, because, I mean, you look at what Nick Chubb did last year, and it was unbelievable. It was his best season. I mean, not only did he hit 1,500 yards, I think, rushing the ball, he actually caught the ball for the first time like ever. I think he had like 25 or 30 receptions, a couple hundred yards. I mean, throw that down, almost a 1,800 yard season as a, you know, 27-year-old. So I agree that Nick Chubb is absolutely a buy. He is absolutely going to help you. I do have a worry that the person that has Nick Chubb has probably had Nick Chubb for a long time, though, and he may cost you a lot. But if you can pitch him on the fact that that contract is running out and he's going to be an old fella in the eyes of the NFL, not in the eyes of any of the three people that are talking on this show currently, you could absolutely acquire him. I'm not mad at you for it. And it's funny that you say this, because you, of all people, have been raining hatred down on Nicholas Chubb for a very long time, my friend. The entirety that we have ever done this podcast.
Well, I will go back to Dan's very first, you know, buy of the night. I am not a Treylon Burks guy. I don't think you develop asthma as an adult. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn Select last night. But I am also, you have to go where the information takes you. You know, I did a podcast on our channel, the Dynasty WarZone channel only, about cognitive dissonance. And I think it's one of the things that absolutely crush Dynasty gamers. Go listen to that podcast, or at a minimum, throw the term cognitive dissonance into a search engine and see what comes up. Because it's basically holding on to a belief, and even when presented with new evidence, you refuse to let go of that core belief because it creates a sense of anxiety, a sense of nervousness, and people will not change their way of thinking. I'm always going to change my way of thinking. When I'm presented with new evidence, I'm going to change the way that I think. So, Dan, I don't know if you wore that orange shirt in honor of me talking about Nick Chubb tonight, but this is why I have Dan on. He and I play in a lot of leagues together, and I like intentionally get him to give me some of his thoughts. But more importantly, again, he is a high-stakes best ball player who has a track record of success. So I want to know, because I'm trying to buy now, I'm trying to win in 2023. What are your seasonal outlooks on Mr. Nick Chubb for this season?
Yeah, I like Chubb a lot because, you know, he is the best, I think, pure runner right now in the NFL. You know, Derrick Henry just bowls people over. That's more of an attribute than a skill, I think. But Chubb has got the skill, and I love that. He's in an offense where we know they're going to run him plenty, but also it's going to be a high-powered offense. If he starts getting those goal line carries and the Browns are actually scoring, you know, I have a hard time remembering the last time the Browns scored a lot of TDs. You know, I've been playing the fantasy football for a long time. So it's one of those things where we know that Chubb is likely to be the guy on the goal line. And if he can get that passing work, even just a little bit, that's going to help him out too. And then he's also that great pure runner who's just going to chew up a lot of yards. So I love Chubb. He is getting a little bit pricey in redraft, though. He's starting to move up close to the first round. He's turning into like the fourth running back off the board, which is, you know, I think okay, but you know, without for sure getting those passes, then that's going to be a little bit of a problem. So, but for Dynasty, and, you know, as long as you know what you're getting, you know, and you expect a guy who's going to get you probably somewhere between running back 4 and running back 8, that's a great buy.
Well, we've had a lot of tremendous support tonight in the chats, and I want to give a shout out to Jamie, because he or she, Jamie, you know, whatever. He said that Nick Chubb is going to catch at least 15 more passes this year. I think that's a great number. That's one a game. If he plays 15 games, very common number for a running back. That feels right. That feels right. Jerry mentioned he was coming off of a career high last year, so I think that's the right number. And if you add 15 catches, and let's say I don't have his stat card pulled up, but let's say he gets 5 yards a catch. So now you just added 75 yards. You just added, you know, that's 7.5 points. I mean, it just doesn't take long to this. It's this little pennies in a bucket. It's like you throw your change in the little jar. At the end of the year, that all adds up to a lot of money. Doesn't seem like a lot at the time. I think it was absolutely well said. So, yep, that's what I have, guys. Dan, what do you have about the GOAT District?
Yeah, so again, we're going to be on Wednesday night with Billy Muzio from Player Profiler. We're going to be talking through wide receivers and tight ends. If you didn't catch our show last week on Player Profiler, we hit the quarterbacks and running backs. And we're just looking for those situations that are really difficult to untangle, and or some really good values that are coming out at those positions. And we'll be doing that on Wednesday on the Player Profiler channel, and then on our own channel on probably Thursday night, myself and Biplab Mandal are going to be doing Best Ball League. It's the 200K FFPC Best Ball Tourney. So we're going to be drafting a team in that. He and I have done several teams so far. I think we're on our 6th or 7th team. We're going to do probably 10, 12 of them together, and this one we're going to do live, so it should be a lot of fun. Yeah,
Dan loves him some best ball, but you know what? If you know, Some people play Dynasty for fun. Some people play fantasy for fun. Some people do this as a hobby. You know, our good buddy, he hopped on the Kiss the Ring Commissioners podcast with me a couple weeks ago. Nate Pilmer, he was like, you know, nowadays $50 is barely dinner and a drink for you and the missus or you and the mister if you go out on the town for an evening. That's a $50, you know, Dynasty league. So it's not an insane amount of money. So for some people, this is entertainment. I play to win. I am the most competitive person, almost to a fault, that most people will meet. So I like to win. I like to win the money. I appreciate our buddy Dan. Dan, thank you so much for jumping on. I got to get JD on now. JD, it's like trying to get an audience with the Pope. You know, JD is slippery to get up, but I'm going to get him on the Kiss the Ring podcast because JD himself is a tremendous commissioner. And a lot of the theories, and I see Jerry nodded his head, and I know Dan's smiling because not only is that his co-host and friend, but Dan knows exactly what I'm talking about. JD is a hell of a commissioner and a hell of a guy. So I'm going to get him on. Dan, I want to thank you again for coming on. And next week, we're going to be doing Dynasty Holds. Guys, you really shouldn't be moving, or you shouldn't be moving them right now. And I've got a very special guest for you guys next week as well. It's good to be in guest season. I'm going to be jumping on with Jack Kavanaugh tomorrow, and then I'm going to be doing a little bit of extra content. So again, just make sure you subscribe everywhere, because even if you just do audio podcast, you're going to get something new. I took it upon myself because I said, Self, you've talked a lot about buying guys like Mac Jones and Brandon Ayuk and Keenan Allen. This audience, the Player Profiler audience, this is a savvy audience. They already know who you like, so you better bring some new likes, or they're going to remind you about it. So be sure to subscribe everywhere. Tons of content coming out from the Dynasty WarZone, the GOAT District, Trade Gods, the Podfather himself, Theo. I think Theo just added 2 new shows in the time we did this one. So be sure to subscribe everywhere. You're listening to Player Profiler. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week. Happy 4th of July if you're here in the States. And thank you to the guys in the chat and the ladies too. You all are awesome. We'll catch you back here next week. See y'all.